Section A. This should be the section where you walk into the exam knowing you have 25 marks in the bag. And I firmly believe every single person watching this video with enough practice, with enough dedicated hours, can achieve full marks on Section A. I've said this previously, but there is around 10 years of past papers now. Section A questions repeat all the time, so there's almost no excuse. Wherever you drop a mark, analyse it, understand, make a plan for next time. If a similar question comes up, how am I going to tackle that to get the right answer? You can pretty much guarantee yourself full marks besides the human errors that you might make. A great bit of practice to do if you're midway through this Section A practice trying to maximise the amount of marks you're getting in Section A is if you ever drop a mark, once you've analysed it, you understood why you dropped the mark and you have a plan for next time, just ask AI to make you similar questions to the one that you dropped the mark on. This means you can have some actual practice on what another exam question might look like and try to score marks on those. And that can really make sure you never drop that mark again. Moving on, Section A is going to be five 5-mark questions, but that's not full 5-mark questions. If you look at this, there's a 2-marker, there is a 1-marker, there's a 2-marker. That makes 5 marks. So that is basically question 1. So if you look at it, that's question 1 of Section A, and you're going to have 5 of these questions basically. They can be multiple choice, they can be 2 markers, 4 markers, basically the range. One of the big parts we've mentioned about Section A is timing. You're trying to work down your timing alongside picking up the maximum amount of marks. I do say 20 minutes maximum, and if you can, work down to 15 minutes. And one way to do that is be more efficient. And the biggest way to be more efficient is please just look at the command words. Here we have calculate, so you need a number, you need to show workings, and relate the command word to the number of marks. So there's calculate, 2 marks, original and new. You're not going to have, and if you look at the mark scheme here, I haven't actually looked at the mark scheme, but I can just tell by these command words, there are going to be no marks for economic theory, for writing words out. All the marks here are going to be calculation. Now let's have a look at some other command words. The main ones, and disproportionately the main ones you're going to get, is calculate and explain. If the command word is explain, you are expected to show some economic theory, some chains of analysis. Explain 2 marks, then you can write as much as you need for 2 marks, as long as you explain that point. So as long as you write enough chain of analysis, enough economic theory for 2 marks, you can then move on. You can get other command words like define. If the command word is defined, there are no marks for explaining it. The only marks are for defining the key term. Also, if you're given any data in Section A, please use it, as it can help you pick up those application marks. Little stimuluses like this, just before the question. This is talking about Go Compare, the comparison site. As the main thing you need to keep in mind, and the thing a lot of students do not actually know, in Section A, any question which is 3 marks or more, there is 1 mark reserved for application. So something like this can work really well. Just quoting it halfway through your paragraph, following a good paragraph structure which includes application, can help you pick up that 1 mark reserved for application. Moving on, from marking countless amounts of Section A's and just generally whole papers, Section B, Section C's, one of the biggest mistakes students make is diagrams. Make sure if you've written a diagram, you haven't made any stupid mistakes, and a really good acronym to save you from this is SCALE. So S stands for shift. Make sure your shift is appropriate of your curves. For example, if we're speaking about the housing sector and we're talking about there's an increase in demand for houses, and we're showing the construction worker supply and demand curve, we would expect the demand, because the derived demand, the demand for construction workers is going to shift out, therefore shift to the right. So just make sure your shift is appropriate. It's going in the right direction basically, where if it's an increase going towards right and if it's a decrease going towards left. I know this sounds extremely and stupidly simple, but you don't understand how many students drop marks on tiny things like this. Now C is for coordinates. Now what do I mean by coordinates? Let's sketch a little supply and demand diagram here, and we'll stick with the same example with the increase in derived demand. So for example, if the demand for houses increases due to derived demand for labour, the demand for construction workers is likely to increase from D to D1. What we mean by coordinates is just basically labelling the equilibriums correctly, PE to P1, so PE standing for price at equilibrium, and now P1 is going to just stand for the new price, Q1. So if you're ever quoting these, make sure you're quoting the right figures. So price increase from PE to P1, quantity increases from QE to Q1, therefore demand increases from D to D1, just making sure you quote them all correctly in an appropriate manner. So C stands for coordinates. A stands for axes, which is the simplest one. Make sure your axes are labelled appropriately. In your exam, do label fully, not just P and Q, price and quantity. This is usually a problem with lower level students, but I still see at the top level, A and A-star students, it's usually with the trickier diagrams like the Marshall learner condition or the Laffer curve especially. That is probably the one I see the most mistakes on. I think it's the exam pressure, since it's very easy to get confused between tax rate and tax revenue. But a lot of the time, if just have a second glance at your diagrams, if you look at it again and you see tax rate is on the wrong axis, you will actually realise your mistake. So a lot of it, yes, it is exam pressure, but just try your best to negate those mistakes. L stands for label, so just making sure everything is labelled: supply, demand, demand plus one, etc, etc. E is just basically an added bonus. It's not really to do with the diagram itself, it's explanation, but it does link to one core characteristic, which is if you draw a diagram, it needs to be heavily included in your chain of analysis, especially for section B, section C. There is no point in drawing a diagram if you're not basically constantly using it, constantly quoting out of it. You haven't exhausted the diagram, because that is how you pick up a lot of marks. Diagrams can really help elevate that chain of analysis. It should be a massive driving force in lots of your essays. It should drive that chain of analysis. What I usually tend to see in lower level students is that they don't really know how to manipulate diagrams, in the sense that they don't know how to incorporate them fully in their chain of analysis, which leads them to having weak chain of analysis. So if you can master the skill of using and fully understanding the diagram to the extent where you're confident enough to speak about it in your chain of analysis, you can elevate that chain of analysis to that next level and get close to the A and A-star level. Now that is a wrap on section A. I hope that was helpful.